Hello and welcome to Filmi Ladies. We are Pithu and Beth, and we had so much fun recording our Labor Day weekend episode called, Working Women, that we decided to do a companion piece about men, movies where the male character goes to work and we learn about his like job or profession or career and all the drama that happens because of it. I will say it is very, very easy to find movies where a male protagonist goes to work compared to movies where women go to work, and that is extremely annoying. But for the purposes of this podcast, it made choosing movies very easy. I mean, there was just so many movies I could choose from. So the movies I watched were Raju Gentleman, which is a 1992 film starring Shah Rukh Khan and is directed by Aziz Mirza. He plays an engineer who moves from Darjeeling to Mumbai to further his career. And the other movie is Rocket Singh, Salesman of the Year. It's from 2009, written by Jaideep Sahani and directed by Shimit Amin, and it stars Ranbir Kapoor. And I think it was one of the earlier films that Ranbir Kapoor did that sort of made people take notice of him. And as the title suggests, he is a salesman. I actually have no idea what movie Beth has chosen, and she told me she has many thoughts. So I'm really looking forward to hear what she has to say. So Beth, what movie did you pick?
Okay, so I forget which other episodes it has been where I have been like, oh God, I have all these things that then led me to another thing. So this is one of those. So so let me tell you what movies I wound up on, but then I'll go back and tell you the path I got there. So
Okay.
there's actually three, but two of them are very similar. So it's basically two. One of them is also about a salesperson, and it is the Satyajit Ray film Jana, Aranya.
Okay.
Apologies for mispronunciation. That is one of my very favorite movies. It is not one of his that gets talked about a lot in my experience. So here I am to bang the drum about it. I did not get time to rewatch it since I thought about doing it. So some of what I say may be a little misinformed, but I have seen it many times and I love it. And then the other ones that I arrived at are kind of the double whammy of very similar films of Ra.One and Robot.
Okay, so by Ra.One, you mean the Shah Rukh Khan one and
sure
not
do.
Ravanan. Okay,
Correct,
okay.
correct. Although that was also on my short list. So my short list is huge because I just, like Pitu was saying, like there's a million billion films where there's something, not only is the male protagonist's job interesting, the film does something interesting with it, which is the funnel I first created for myself just because there were so many. And so I started thinking about something like Luck by Chance. Yes, we get a lot of movies about actors relatively, but that's definitely one of the better ones. I also considered Ray's Nayak, which I've already done a podcast about over guest hosting over on the Khandan Families podcast of You Podcasting. So I was like, I've talked about that already, but that's another amazing one that does something really, really interesting with the fact that the male lead is an actor. And then I was thinking about things that aren't really jobs, but are more like callings. So things like freedom fighters. Right. There's a ton of those movies that are really interesting. And then I got annoyed that there aren't any that I could think of about women in that same kind of like women with a calling that's not exactly what they get paid for, but it's what they spend all of their energy on, And then I was thinking about criminals. Like, is that a job? Sort of,
I guess technically it is. Like, there are career criminals.
And I did bring forward at one point the film Chori Mere Kam. So, but so there's like Dawn or Oi Lucky Lucky Oi. Then I was thinking about Men Undercover because there's a million of those and like how that really shapes everything and how lying impacts the way the person treats other people and how it endangers their relationships. So like we have Mehuna, which is not something we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but is a favorite. I know of mine. I think of yours too.
Yeah.
Or not that I want to talk about Fana, but that's another one. Or I recently watched the Shami Kapoor film Prince. Back when we were talking
with
about
Mala.
And I have to say that's my favorite Shami Kapoor role I've ever seen because it's kind of more nuanced and more interesting than most of what I've seen him do so far. Then I was thinking about
I have to interject
except for when he's a brain surgeon.
No, but well, that too, that is the best. But also I've never heard the word Shami Kapoor and nuanced in the same sentence, so I did a double take.
It's
and
relative.
I say this as a Shami Kapoor fan.
Oh yeah, it's relative, but relatively. And then I was thinking about things that we've already talked about at some length, like Dear Zindagi, like obviously the fact that he is a therapist and the fact that she enters into therapy, like that's the whole definition of the
Yeah.
film and sets up everything. So that's really important. Or things like Chuck Day, the fact that someone is a
Yes.
coach. But we've already talked about those quite a bit. So I kind of then was getting myself towards things like creators and artists, which is how I ended up with Ra.One and Endhiran. So we have, inventor, scientist, creator types.
Right.
One of my friends I was brainstorming with was like, you could do disco dancer because I am a disco dancer. I was like, no, he will kill me if I bring disco dancer to this podcast. But,
No, I would have actually loved it.
well, if we have time at the end or energy, we can throw in disco
But the
dancer.
condition is you have to do a Mithunda hip thrust.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Because
not
like no
prepared
one's
for that.
gonna see it anyway. You're sitting, so you just have to like fake it.
Chair dance, disco
Yeah.
dancing is hard. I do love that movie though. I love it a
Wow.
lot.
So you really went down a rabbit hole.
I was because I did this the way I looked for the women at work one, which was I went through my giant list of everything I've seen, and I was going in chronological order that I watched them in. So I've gone further back than I maybe expected, but it's pretty hard to choose, especially when I was thinking about what is a job or what is work or
Yeah.
those kinds of things. So, but yeah, we're spoiled
So
for
real
choice.
existential questions here. What is work? What is a job?
What is work? Well, and I've been thinking one of the things this made me think about was and maybe this is showing my bias as a, spent almost all of my life in America. It's easy to let work define you. And
Right.
I don't want to bring that energy to this discussion, which is why I was trying to think about what are films where the job is interesting and also they do something kind of juicy or different with it.
Right.
Which I think the films I've landed on do, because no one should be defined by their job, especially if they don't want to be. So, I was trying to be conscious of that as well, because there's nothing wrong with work just being the way you earn the money you need to make a living. So, and I'm sure there are movies that dig into that as well. I don't know, where do you want to start? I know that I feel like you kind of chose this topic because you've been wanting to talk about Gaya Gentleman for over a year. So like, I think you should just uncork and go for it.
I love Raju Bandiya Gentleman so much. Like it is literally in my top 5 of Shah Rukh Khan movies. I love his character in it. I love everything about it. I just find that movie so relatable, despite, a lot of the masala-ness in it. It's just the core of it. And I feel like I respond very well to Aziz Mirza movies for some reason. Even when they're not great, I can still find something there. So what I love about Raju Bandiya Gentleman is it does have a little bit of a Sri Charsobi's vibe to it. And what I love about it is how Shah Rukh just goes through this entire evolution that we see. Like the movie, he literally starts with this song of Yaro Main To Chala, like he's off from Darjeeling, from this tiny little hill station. He has an engineering degree and he wants to be somebody. He literally has some like not callous, but slightly unkind, but funny dialogues where he tells his friends, like, I'm not going to be in a small town my whole life. Like, I'm going to Mumbai. I'm going to become a big engineer, like, unlike you losers. And they're like, no, we get it. And it's like, he's so bright eyed and bushy tailed and has that enthusiasm that only Shah Rukh can bring, just this like unbridled energy. And you really get caught up in it. You're like, yeah. And I love the title Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman, because for him, it's not just about going to Mumbai and getting a job and being an engineer and setting off on this career path. For him, it's also a way to rise in society, right? Because a profession or a job is one of the ways that, unless you're privileged and come from generational wealth, it's one of the ways that you make a living, and it's one of the ways you climb the ladders of society. So it's like, I'm going to go to Mumbai, I'm going to become successful, I'm going to become rich, people are going to know my name, and I'm going to become a gentleman. And it's set up so beautifully because you're rooting for him and you want him to succeed. And then he comes to Mumbai and he has like a few hard knocks. He's finding it hard to get a job. He's living in this basti that has all these colorful characters like Juhi Chawla, and there's Nana Patekar and all these like amazing people, and the chai wala person and the bakery person. And it's this cute, it's very like reminiscent of Joji Tabi Sikandar in the way that Basti is set up. And then, he does get his job and you're like, yes, yay, go Raju. He's so happy. And there's all these scenes where like you can see how much of a wanter he is. Whereas Juhi Chawla provides this perfect foil to him, where she's just kind of like, do your job, get your money, go home. Like, there's no need to dream too big, but he takes her to like a car showroom where he talks about how he's going to buy a car one day. Like, he can't afford it today, but one day he will. And then he says, I got my first salary, let's go to a 5-star restaurant. And she's like, no, bet ke chane khao, like just eat the peanuts. And he's like, no, so he's such a wanter. And I think that sets it up so well, where you're like, uh-oh, the shoe's
Mm.
gonna drop. Like, he's a wanter, no good will come of this. And then you see him like enter this world where Amrita Singh is kind of the person that's like sort of beckoning him. And I love her character as well, because she's not an out and out villain, but she is a practical person whose dad
Mm.
happens to be very corrupt. And then you see Raju turn from this innocent, naive, adorable, endearing person to a person who starts giving bribes. And there's an entire montage of him, like, basically like indulging in corruption and things like that, because he just wants to get the contracts for the company. And you just see the sort of downward slide. And I think the one song that I love is Tu Mere Saath Saath Asma Se Aage Chal, which is at that party where Amrita Singh is like dancing with him, and they're just like drinking the champagne. And it literally means, come with me and let's go beyond the sky. Let's
Mm.
and he just has these stars in his eyes. And when the fall comes, it's so heartbreaking. And there's the scene where the bridge that they have built with like the bad hi that they've built with like the bad concrete collapses, and some of the people from their basti die.
Mm.
And his corrupt boss, played by Naveen Nishchal, tells him, because he's the main engineer, so he's going to be on the hook, right? He tells him on the news, you have to say that it was actually the work of terrorists, because, and that's what the police are investigating. And he doesn't want to say it, but he does, because otherwise he's going to get investigated. And
Mhm.
then at night, he's scared, so he drives back to the basti, and Nana Vadekar grabs him by the collar, and he shows him the dead bodies of the people from the basti. And he basically says, why have you come here? Why have you come to pay your respect? They're just terrorists, right? Like, they blew up the bridge, right? They're not people. And it's just like,
Mm.
no. I think this movie is wonderful because it just shows what a slippery slope it can be, from being a person with honesty and integrity, and just this like, oh, it's just one bribe, who's it gonna hurt? And yeah, it's a little bit of corruption, but you can't do anything without corruption. And before you know it, you're just like throwing everyone under the bus, all because you want
Mm.
to be rich. And it's heartbreaking. And it's very reminiscent to me of another movie I love, which is The Firm, that has Tom Cruise in it playing an attorney. Where similar is, he's like, he comes from nothing, he comes from no money, and now he's this hotshot lawyer. And then the
Mm.
firm basically gets its tentacles in him. And I love these stories where like this innocent, pure, naive character just gets corrupted and sort of sullied. It's very, very sad, but unfortunately I think it's very real. And I think Shahrukh does such a
Capitalism.
great job. Yeah, but Shark just does such a great job, and
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking to me. But I love that movie, and I love the ending where he just kind of like, he's gonna start all over again. Um, so yeah, I have a soft spot for this film. You've probably seen Raju
I
Gentleman?
have. It's been a long time though,
Yeah.
and I'm very keen to rewatch it.
It really holds up. I mean, there's some datedness, but
Mm.
honestly, Shahrukh just brings his enthusiasm. I think it's one of his best movies. He's given a very nuanced performance, and you really like feel for him, because I think so much of that character is who he really is in real life.
I was about to ask, like, as someone who
Yeah,
has lived the
the
most
wanting.
remarkable trajectory of success, and not just
Yeah,
money but and fame, but also money and fame, like, I wonder how he feels about, being an actor, you're not going to have the responsibility of a bridge collapsing,
yeah,
but I wonder how he, views this film now that he is more successful than he probably ever imagined he could possibly be.
yeah. The other movie that I find that I also rewatch, which I love, is Rocket Singh Salesman of the Year, and I assume you've seen that too.
Mhm.
That is actually interesting. That has a slightly different take from Raju Gentleman, because again, in that, Rocket Singh, Harmeet Singh, played by Ranbir Kapoor, is this, again, innocent, naive, sheltered person, and he wants to make a difference, and then he becomes a salesperson, and then he sees the tomfoolery in his office and decides to kind of go out on his own and do his own thing. But he is shown as having integrity at the beginning of the movie, and he's shown as having integrity at the end. And in fact, with his quote unquote goodness, or his moral uprightness, he actually manages to um, create a little bit of a change of heart in Puri, which was the boss, who is, just the sort of like corrupt and awful person. And Rocket Singh is much more nuanced than Raju Gentleman is.
Sure.
Raju Gentleman is very masala. It's very 90s. It's very like balls to the wall, like Bollywood. And Rocket Singh has a much more indie vibe. Probably it's the combination of, Jaideep Sahani and Shamit Amin. But that one is also very interesting. It's a smaller world. And one thing I love about Rocket Singh, which I don't love about Raju Gentleman, is a lot of these films that have sort of a naive and innocent character who gets corrupted. It's almost always they're from a small town, and then they
Yeah.
move to the big city.
Yeah.
And as someone who is from big cities, as someone from Mumbai and who's lived in New York and who's lived in Chicago, I don't like that, because big cities do not have a monopoly on bullshit.
No,
Okay. And
no.
and everybody from a small town is not, this virtuous, principled person. So stop with it. I do not like that. Having
Nah.
said that, I like that Rocket saying the character is, presumably born and raised in Mumbai. He's always lived there. And, it's a little more realistic. It's not like he got corrupted by the big cities, wiles, and, things like that. I recommend that movie also. And Prem Chopra is absolutely hysterical in Rocket Singh. I was taking screen captures of his dialogues, like, sign in, eat lunch, go home. That's like career advice from Prem Chopra. And then he has one dialogue when Rocket Singh comes home and he's like very exhausted because he's had like a long day at work and lots of drama. And Prem Chopra goes, jobs these days, they make men into coconuts. And that's not a wrong subtitle. He actually says ki banda nariyal ban jata hai. I was like, what does that even mean? I'm gonna frame those and put them in my boss's office.
What
I'm
do you
gonna
think
be
that
like,
does mean, like hard on the outside?
no, I think it just means like
Empty?
like hard-headed, maybe like
Okay.
a coconut. Like, I don't even
Yeah.
know. I've never heard this analogy before, but I'm gonna print it and keep it in my boss's office and be passive aggressive.
I
I'm
will
gonna be like,
cross
yeah.
stitch a pillow for you.
Yes, do it, do it. That would be great. Sign in, eat lunch, go home. But yeah, the Rocket Singh does not sign in, eat lunch, and go home, and
No.
therein is the drama of that movie. How do you feel about Ranveer's performance in Rocket Singh?
I remember liking it very much. I mean, I don't think I've ever disliked a Ranbir performance.
Yes.
Now, I will say I have not seen quite all of his movies because I didn't see the one with Shraddha Kapoor, which people said fairly good mixed things about in my world. But
It was pretty terrible.
I wasn't sold on it. Although our friend Sal has a wonderful Twitter thread about why Ranbir is, so great in it, and sort of his abilities as a romantic leading man. That have almost made me want to watch it, or have made me, almost convinced me to watch it, I should say. And then I did not ever finish Rockstar because I hated it. Not because of him. And I think the music for that film is absolutely top notch, but I've never been able to finish it, partly because of Nargis, but also it takes a lot to get me through a film about tortured man artist, especially man-child artist, especially rock musician. Like Ra.One was actually on my short list of films because obviously these are people, and I guess that's more of a calling than a job, but like, I hated that movie the first time through, and I couldn't actually rewatch it. I wouldn't, but I was just like, oh, is that one to talk about? No.
But Imtiaz Ali and Tortured Men, that is basically his brand.
Right. And sometimes the way the torture is, so the same friend I was brainstorming with who suggested Disco Dancer was like, oh, what about Jab We Met? And I was like, I don't think his job is that interesting in it, but he does, that's more of a like manic pixie dream girl, helps him change, which done very well, as was my impression at the time. Manic Pixie is a pretty hard sell on me at this point as well, but
Right.
that's a good one, obviously.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Sui Dhaga? Because I know you also like Varun Dhawan.
I have, and I like it very much. That would
It's
have been a
so
really a cute
darling.
addition to this. Yeah.
It's
And that one's
really sweet.
that's again job and sort of calling
Yes.
at the same time
Yeah.
slash passion slash, and it's got the
So many
creator
things.
aspect in it because you're a
Yeah.
maker and an inventor of, of clothing. Yeah, I love
There's
that
also
one.
the family business aspect
Uh-huh.
to it. Because like
Uh-huh.
it's Suidaga is like one of the best movies I've seen, especially about, issues like that. And especially because I'm so interested in fashion and I work in
Right.
fashion. I really like
Right.
it. And Anushka Sharma and Varun Dhawan were so good in that movie. I highly, highly recommend Suidaga for people who have not seen it. It's a comfort watch.
My memory of it is that there's a lovely amount of focus on the actual making and the makers and
Yes.
not just, oh, I'm a designer, and like no
Yeah.
knock to designers, but like someone actually has to make those clothes. And those are the people
Right.
who are the hardest done by in the global textile
Yes.
industry, or even probably the small scale local textile industries and clothing industries. So like that's a lovely, lovely
Yeah.
film. And I remember thinking, oh, I wonder how this will be, and then being delighted by it.
Yeah, exactly. So I have seen Nayak, but I have not seen Jan Aranya. It's on my list. So tell me more
Mm.
about Jan Aranya.
Okay. So this is a film that I just was blown away by the first time I watched it. And so I've revisited it a few times. It's part of the Calcutta trilogy, talking about, people trying to find their way in the Mahanagar, like,
Yes.
so it does have some similarities with the Ray film we talked about in our Women at Work series, but this one is about a young college graduate who's having trouble finding a job, and he, slips on a banana peel as one does, and is kind of helped to his feet by Utpal Dutt, whom
Mm,
we stan, who
adore.
kind of gets him into a job as a salesman.
Okay.
And so it deals with the ethical compromises that one makes in sales, particularly
Mm,
in sales, but not only in sales, but just kind of in life. And like, you're young and idealistic, and that's not how the world is, or it's certainly not how the world is when you need to earn money. And and it actually, I don't want to spoil it too much, but it does end with as I recall, a fairly well handled look at what does it mean to sell yourself in various
mm,
different ways. And are women who sell themselves any different than men who sell themselves in a more corporate setting? I
right.
suspect some of that has dated a little bit, but there's no strong language being thrown around about is it, as I recall.
Right.
but it is a kind of a mark of doing what you have to do, or maybe that's what you choose to do and that's what you want to do. It's all very complicated, but it's a really lovely, and in the Ray way, right? Like there's nothing big and splashy about it, but it's getting at all these really big issues in this fairly small scope of this one person and his family. And um I assume they count as middle class Calcutta because he's been to university, so
Right.
I believe that the Naxal violence and all is in rebellions are in kind of the background of this film, or they are about to be, if I recall. So it's late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
Seema Bada is one of the other ones. And then I forget the other one in the Calcutta trilogy. They're all great. I feel like Seema Bada is the one everybody talks about, maybe because Sharmila
Right.
Tagore is in it. But to me, this is one of the strongest Ray films, and that's saying quite a lot. I highly, highly recommend it. And
And
the
who's
lead
the?
actor, I'm gonna
I was
have to
just gonna
look his
ask
name
you.
up because I don't remember Pradeep Mukherjee, who is
Okay.
just, he's one of these. I love this about so many of the Bengali male leads. Like there's this kind of gentleness to him.
Right.
I don't want to say he's quite Bhadralok because I don't think he's kind of rich enough to be Bhadralok, but like this sort of educated, gentle, like trying to make his way, and like gets pushed a little too far, and like how is he going to deal with that? And there's not like, this is not a guns blazing movie, right? This is a
Right.
much more like interior struggle kind of thing. It does have a
Right.
lot in common with Mahanagar, if I recall correctly,
Okay.
but just a super lovely film. And shout out to, of course, Robi Ghosh, who plays, is kind of the comic. He's not quite the comic sidekick, but he does have a more comic role in the film. And he's always a great Bengali character actor who, if you've never seen him in a film, you will enjoy him, I think, quite a lot. So great cast, just amazing, amazing film.
My cat is very interested in our podcast recording today. Like, she doesn't have a job. It's like you just lay around and like sun yourself. So, what do you care?
I mean, in my house growing up with pets, my parents always, when we mostly had dogs, so this statement was designed to apply to dogs, but perhaps applies to cats. The dogs are keeping the elephants away, and that's their job, and they do a really good job because there's never any elephants.
Right, that's true.
So I'm sure she's doing that in California.
My pets are keeping Nazguls and Dementors away, and that's an important job as well. I've
That
never
too.
ever been attacked by a Nazgul or a Dementor.
And that's why she's so
So
sleepy all the
it's
time. That
working.
takes a lot of energy, and which she expends when you're not looking, and she's
This
tired.
is true. This is true. I should be more appreciative. You're right.
Yeah. We don't know. We don't know.
But we assume so.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the other movie you wanted to talk about
So
apart
then
from
I
Jana
have
and
this,
Aranya?
yeah, this pairing of Ra.One and
Yes.
Endhiran, because I started thinking about kind of inventors, and those were the films that came to mind. And of course, those films came out within about a year of each other, with Robot being first, but I'm sure Ra.One was well underway being developed by the time. So it's interesting how similar they are. But they pair really well together. I think about these men, scientists in the sort of digital realm, right? Now, one of them is making video games, the other one is making actual robots, but their creations run away from them,
Right.
in various ways. It was interesting. So I rewatched most of Robot just today. Ra.One, I feel, is actually a little bit darker because the creation kills the creator in that one.
Right.
And that does not happen in Endhiran, because I suppose no one is going to kill Rajnikant in a Rajnikant film. I don't know. Maybe it
There
happens
would
somewhere,
probably
but
be rioting in the
I,
streets.
but it was great. Obviously, both of them are interesting dual roles, and getting these actors to play kind of replicant versions of themselves in a way is really interesting. Now, granted, again, Robot is much more in that direction, and you get Rajnikant versus Rajnikant, or at least talking to himself like all the time in the film.
Oh,
And Ra.One doesn't really have that as much. Have you not seen Robot, Pitu?
no. Mm-mm. I considered watching it,
Oh,
but I am probably the minority that would watch the movie for Aishwarya because I have zero interest in
I
Rajnikant.
was about to ask you. I think she's dubbed in it. I'm not sure. Someone should
She
correct me if I'm
probably
wrong.
is. She
She
doesn't speak
she
Tamil.
sounds weird to me in it. Um,
I think they always dub her.
yeah. So that you should watch it at some point just for funsies.
Okay.
But it's not her best. But the
Right.
film's not about her. She's very,
Right.
she's important in it, but it could have been probably most anyone. The
I've
age
seen
difference between
her.
them is super gross. Like
Yeah.
it's bad.
I've seen her videos, and I liked her fashions in some of
The
the videos with
songs,
like the ostrich feathers
yeah,
and
the songs in
everything.
that
So
film I
yeah.
feel like have held up fairly well. There's other parts of it that have not, maybe. Um, so both of those films, I think, have that, man versus machine and man versus creation and all those kinds of things, which are big, thorny questions. And I remember reading an article in the New York Times years ago by, I think, an Indian American author, but certainly someone who is well familiar with Indian cinema, who was talking about we should look at the villain to see what the film is actually really about, because it tells us
Hmm.
what our society is anxious about or afraid of, or things like that. And so obviously, like in our age of AI really having come,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking about AI more in this last year than I have my whole life put together, and I work around college students who are always talking about it and kind of thinking
Yeah.
about, doing assignments based on not using, well, I'm sure some of them are using it to do their assignments,
Yeah.
but like, trying to wrangle with this and what does it mean for their futures and all. That's really interesting. And, in Endhiran, I'll just say that the robot that Rajnikant creates,
Hmm.
eventually he decides to try to give it feelings, because his point
Okay.
is to sell it, or give it rather, to the Indian army, so that Indians don't have to die in war so much. And the army says this thing can't make the distinctions between who it's killing and things like
Mm.
that. And obviously Asimov's robot rules say that robots should not harm humans, but in war you have to. So like, how are you going to
Right.
do that? Danny Denzongpa plays one of the military guys who's like reviewing whether they're going to take this robot on, and he's one of the ones who's like, we can't do this. But then of course it turns out he's evil, and he's going to try to sell it to like a German, interestingly, like a German
Okay.
guy who's speaking German in the film. It's very funny. And then he eventually Rajni tries to teach the robot emotions. And at one point, the robot is struck by lightning, which I think actually has something to do with how it learns emotions. And it falls in love with Aishwarya, which is super creepy. Like this whole, like,
But can we blame him?
No, but it's still gross. And then Rajni like flips out and destroys the robot, throws it away. But then Danny Denzongpa goes and gets it out of the rubbish heap and puts it back together
Oh,
and puts a red chip in it. It's literally a red chip, makes it bad.
okay.
And then it, sort of it abducts Ashwarya from her wedding, and it's really creepy. There's at
It
least
actually sounds interesting.
it's very interesting.
I
You can
dismissed it as yet another
no,
silly Rajinikanth
No, it's
movie.
really
So,
good. It's really
okay.
good. You could probably fast forward the first half hour or so because that's a lot of like wacky stunts with what can you do with a
Mm.
robot and like teach the
Right.
robot to play tricks on people. And like the other scientists in the lab are like, they tie the robot's shoelaces together so it falls over and stuff like that.
Okay.
So just, you can probably fast forward that part, but it's really good. And the obviously some of the action pieces are spectacular with the like millions of clones of robots kind of assembled to
Ah,
giant shapes. If you've never seen the clips of those, you will enjoy the surprise of them in the movie. So it's really worth watching. The songs are of course excellent. And then Ra.One, I will say it. I'm a Ra.One apologist. I have really enjoyed this film more and more since it's come out. I think I've seen it 4 times at this
oh,
point.
wow.
I know, maybe I've seen it more than Shahrukh has seen it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, thinking about the villain, like the villain is actually kind of an unchecked bratty child
Right.
who who like thinks it's cool to be bad and like creates this monster that then obviously becomes sentient, or well, not, this is all very unclear to me, like what's actually happening in Ra.One. Like are they robots, are they digital things
Yeah.
that are somehow physical, like whatever, it doesn't matter, like don't think about the science too hard in any of
Right.
these things. um and I just think that it had a lot of ideas in it, and it does have some pretty spectacular set pieces in it. And like that scene where the train comes crashing through Victoria Station,
Hmm.
I really love that. Like here comes modern Indian science barreling through
Right.
a symbol
Right.
of the colonial occupier, like I
Right.
think that's pretty great. So there's some really cool things in that movie too. And it is like, yes, Shahrukh as taking on two roles does survive the film, so to speak, but like his scientist character is such a sweetie and they kill him off. Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty
That
fascinating. Also,
movie,
great songs. Great songs.
I only remember Chamak Chalo.
Um,
I don't remember any other song
oh,
from that
the
movie.
other one with Akon in it is really good.
That's the one. That's the Chamak Chalo
No, there's
song
another
where
one.
oh,
There's
there's one
another
more?
one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I have to get my got my Wikipedia entries open. Why don't I remember the names of anything when I come to this podcast? Um,
I actually watched Ra.One in the theater when it was released, and we had bought 13 tickets, and it was the last row in the theater because,
wow.
like, my entire family had gone,
Criminal.
including
Criminal.
oh, yeah, Criminal.
Yeah.
No, I don't remember that either. I basically only remember Chamak Chalo.
I
But
mean,
yeah, we
that's
had
all you need to remember. It's the best one.
yeah. So we had, like, 13 seats, including, my cousin's grandma, like,
Aw.
from the paternal side, so I'm not related to her. So she was the oldest person, and the youngest person was my baby cousin. And I have a really close friend, Shakti, who is also, like, a diehard Shah Rukh fan, and I was standing in line for the advance tickets, and I was gonna buy 13, and I texted her, and I was like, "Hey, do you want me to buy a ticket for you? This is the day and time we're gonna go. You can sit with us." And she was like, "Give me a few minutes. I just have to ask my dad for permission." And I was like, since when has this girl asked her parents for permission to do anything? Like, whatever. But I was
Huh.
like, okay, sure. And then 10 minutes later, incoming call from Shakti. And I was like, yeah, what's up? And the line had barely inched forward. So I was like, what's up? Are you coming for the movie? And she goes, I can't. So it turns out she was in the hospital because she had typhoid, and she was hospitalized, and she had like the what do you call it, the IV drip in her, and she asked her dad for permission to take the IV drip out and go for the movie that evening. And her dad basically told her to shut up and just recover. So she called me to tell me that her dad was being a tyrant and he wouldn't let her go. And I was like, I didn't even know you were in the hospital. Now I'm going to look like a bad person for inviting you. So the next time I went to her house, I very like blatantly dropped a comment about how it was so sad that Shakti had typhoid. And if I had known, I would never, ever have invited her to watch a movie.
I'm not that
But
bad of an influence.
I know. But yeah, so she was very disappointed she couldn't see with us. And it was my cousin's grandma's reactions were the most funny because she had no idea what was going on. So afterwards, we had to explain the whole plot to her. Because she was like, so there's a human and there's a scientist, but then there's a robot, but then the robot is we were like, it's fine, it's fine. I remember when Ra.One came out, there was so much displeasure um,
People
among
were
South
so upset about
Indians.
that movie
They were so
in many
upset.
ways.
Yeah, but, like, the scenes where I think isn't there a scene where so Shah Rukh is South
Yeah.
Indian, and is he
Yeah.
eating spaghetti with, like,
Curd and
yogurt?
noodles.
Curd,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
god, I know, and it was just so cringe, and it's like, I love Shah Rukh, but come on, man, you don't have to be so awfully bigoted. Like, I know you're from Delhi, but you gotta stop with this bullshit. Like, of course, that is primarily the director's fault, not the actors, but you're Shah Rukh Khan. Don't tell me
Yeah.
you don't have any
He
power.
wouldn't have had to do that if he wasn't willing to do
Yeah,
it.
you can put your foot down and say this is
Make
not,
another joke. Make another
yeah,
stupid
this
joke instead.
awful stereotyping is not gonna be. I don't think Shah Rukh even realizes how much hate he gets from South Indians every time he participates in this kind of rubbish. And I'm not even South Indian and I'm offended on their behalf. So so I remember that. Like I think I'd given up Twitter a long time before that, but like I remember that I was like scared to even say anything about Ra.One in front of my South Indian friends because I knew they were gonna like scream at me.
I just feel like it's a film that has a ton of ideas in it, and it was a huge swing and a miss, if I'm going to use a
Yes.
baseball term,
Yes.
but at least it was trying some stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people would say, well, you need to refine your ideas before that's part of trying, is to refine. And I agree with that, but I don't know. I find that film really, really interesting. If there's anyone who agrees that it's an interesting film, please identify yourself, or at least anonymously, or to me in an email or something, because I want to know I'm not alone in this. But um, and in terms of like films about an occupation and what it can do to you, like it's a really kind of extreme
Yeah.
example. And obviously there's a huge fantastical element in it too. And like some of the films we talked about in our Women at Work, this also has to do with parenting,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so like the love of the father for his son, and then eventually of the son for his father, and like kind of understanding that your parents are humans who are doing their best and trying and things like that, and you don't get to be a bratty jerk about it. Like our great friend Amalu on Twitter,
Mhm.
who we know from back in the blog days, she and I have an ongoing joke about how that kid, you can tell he's such a brat because he plays the triangle in the band. Like, you got to put the talentless hack on the triangle. That's how we know what the film thinks of this kid. Like, this kid's a nightmare.
Right.
um
You know,
yeah.
another movie that has like an inventor angle to it is isn't it Koi Mil Gaya?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
the scientist person and then
Hmm.
the jadoo and all of that, like,
Hmm.
that was interesting too. So the
Hmm.
thing about Ra.One is that I did watch it in the theater. I've only seen it the one time, and I remember enjoying it,
Hmm.
but for whatever reason, I have never revisited it. I've just never felt the need to watch it. It's not like I hated it or anything.
Right.
It just didn't strike me as being particularly, like, memorable. Like, if I'm gonna watch a Shah Rukh movie, I would probably
Yeah.
rewatch Kabhi Haan Kabhi Na or Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman, like, or Yes Boss. Like, I have like my
Sure.
standard Shah Rukh films that I just rewatch.
I would say,
And
like, fast forward through the beginning part and maybe get to where like the
yeah,
characters start, something starts really going wonky with the video game, and go maybe on from there and enjoy
okay,
some of those set pieces if you feel like it. Like, that's, the juicier
yeah,
part of the film, I think, is the second half for sure. Now, not consistently, there's some slow parts in that too, but like you know the setup you remember, and like it's kind of sad, and
yeah.
then you know
So I remember when we did our underrated Shah Rukh episode, and I chose Ahsoka and you chose Josh. Would you call Ra.One, like, is that an underrated film?
to
I know it's an
me.
underwatched film,
Yeah,
but is it
to
underrated?
me, it is. Now, a very
Okay.
important caveat has to go here, because obviously this film falls at least somewhat under the umbrella of superhero movies. And
Yes.
I am not a superhero movies person. I don't dislike them. I just don't gravitate towards them. I haven't seen
Same.
remotely all of the Marvel movies. Like, I don't care. And not in a like, ew way. It's just, I just don't care. Like, they don't
Yeah.
speak to me really.
You're just
So
indifferent.
yeah, I'm largely indifferent to them overall. So I feel like it's very valid to bring sort of what was going on with superhero movies at that time, 2011, and kind of take it. You got to apply it's very relevant to apply those things to it. And I can imagine that that's part of why people were so disappointed in it overall, is that it wasn't living up to whatever people were getting out of some of the Marvel movies and others. It's not like Marvel are the only superheroes, but you know what I
Right.
mean? So I feel like I don't bring that set of
Expectation.
concerns and expectations to it. And maybe that's why I have been gentler on it than other people, and why I kind of like parts of it, or I don't kind of like, I do like parts of it. I do think it's interesting. If you're not a Shah Rukh fan, are you going to give it another chance? Maybe not. I don't know. But like, if you're a Karina fan, it's not really her movie at all, but you know, she's having fun in it. The fact that it's 12 years old now,
Right.
like, holy moly, where did the 2010s go?
Right.
You know, I think it's worth a revisit, but I understand that a lot of people will never revisit it. I get that. And like what you're saying, if you're just in the mood for Shah Rukh, this is not going to be the film that you choose. But, you know, if you want to look at, again, like looking at the villain, I think that's really, really interesting. And that's a great way to approach a film that you've seen before, but you didn't really pay particular attention to that. And not just the performance of the villain, but like, what is this villain about? What is their motivation? What are they threatening? What are they causing fear over? What do they destabilize? How are they a disruptor? You know, that kind of thing. Like, and in, you know, something like this, like a video game is in its own way synthetic, right? Like both of these films, Endhiran and Ra.One, are both about artificiality in some interesting ways. And that is very, very relevant to us now, and is only going to be more so, I suspect, for the rest of the information revolution, if not beyond. So I think it has a lot to do with that. And also the idea of, you know, I think it's often said that stories about men as scientists get greater traction than ones about women sometimes, because women as creator, okay, that can be done biologically, but men don't have that same, or females and males, I should say. So the, you know, watching a man deal with his or a male deal with his creation is interesting, because you don't get that quite the same in the biological way and in narratives. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But,
there's actually a movie in the theaters right now that my husband and I have been trying to figure out when to actually watch it, just because of our conflicting schedules. It's called The Creator, and it is actually on a similar subject. It's about like these AI robot things, and you know, them taking over and stuff like that. It sounds really, really interesting. My husband didn't want to like really spoil the plot, but I love stories like that. So like I love all of the Duke's Machina kind of stuff. So and it seems like the kind of movie you would want to watch in a movie theater, you know, just to like feel that impact. So yeah, you should consider watching that. We might try to go see like a matinee show this weekend or something like that. Stop it. Sorry, my cat is trying to eat my
part of her job.
headphones. Huh?
It's part of her job. No strings.
Okay, so what do you think about the fact it's so irritating to me that there were so many movies I could think of that had like a
I
male
know.
protagonist, and then when we wanted to do the women at work, it was literally like head scratching, like what can we think of?
Although it was easier with the women than I kind of thought it would be. Once I started going, I found more than I thought I would. But yeah, it's not nearly as rich. Like I was thinking about, I very deliberately didn't choose a movie where someone's a cop, for example, because you know, but when I was I kind of did this like off to the side thing of like, we could do a whole episode on interesting cops. Like you could do a whole podcast series on that, obviously. But I was like, if I had to name one where I think the fact that the male lead is a police officer and the film does something really interesting with it, like I wrote down Talash.
That's
And then I
so
actually wrote down Ra.One. Or Ravana, you know, so like we have something really interesting and different happening, because the cop is not the hero in that film, even though blah, 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 you know, so like it is possible to do really interesting things with that and not glorify the police as a force, which I want to be careful not to do. But obviously there's kind of countless cops in Hindi and other Indian cinemas that we could have chosen, but I didn't want to, even though it's kind of like the number one job, you know.
My favorite Hindi film cop will always be Shashi Kapoor in Diwar.
Yeah, that's fair.
So darling.
So
And
I
of
did.
course, Mere Paas Maa Hai, which is like always guaranteed. It's just like such a jaw drop moment. I love
Whenever
it.
anyone asks me for my favorite Hindi film dialogue, before they kind of realize I don't know Hindi as well as they maybe thought that I did, that's what I say. And then they're like, oh, like, oh, you like old movies? I'm like, yes, I do. But also that only has 4 words in it, so I can say it.
Yes.
I did put a Shashi Kapoor film on this list.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually thought about Shashi in particular because I thought, well, we always want to talk about him and we don't have a way yet until the project I think
Yes,
you're about to
yes.
mention. But I thought, I was remembering years ago when Amrita and I had a podcast, we did an episode about Agale Lagja, the Manmohan
All
Desai
right.
films. And it stands out in many ways, one of which is because it is the only film I can think of where the hero has such a less prestigious job than the heroine. She is a medical student and then a doctor. He is a roller skating teacher.
What?
Yeah, he's a roller
I did
skater.
not see that coming.
I know.
A roller skate.
I know. And I don't know if he owns the rink where he teaches. I don't know. He's got land inside somewhere in Mumbai, which is going to be worth a fortune now. Hope he held on to it.
Right.
But yeah, so he's a roller skating teacher and there's cute songs on roller skates and it being a Desai film, like the child is crippled. So we have the contrast between someone who's like on wheels versus someone who can't walk, and like the finale like big brawl, it does involve roller skates and wheels and things like that. So like it's actually, they do again something interesting is kind of done with it, but it's more about the wheel symbolism than it is about the fact that he's a roller skating instructor, I think. And then there's like these goons who come to the roller skating rink and harass the young women. Like it's hilarious. Is that Shashi Kapoor on the roller skates all the time? Obviously not, because they actually credit like an all Asia roller skating champion or something like that. But you see him head to toe on the skates a few times. And like we joked in that podcast episode about like I'm imagining Jennifer Kendall encouraging him to go method and like learning how to skate. But anyway, so that was one that came to mind just as that's an oddball job.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the householder also, right? Because the fact that he's a teacher and doesn't earn a lot is kind of.
He's so darling in it. And Leela Naidu is just such a vision. I love
I haven't seen that in so long. I knew I'd have to rewatch it. And I didn't know if I'd have time, but that's an interesting one for Jana. And often he's just like industrialist guy or like
rich
guy who doesn't even have a job, or like every now and then he's a scientist or something like that, but I feel like, or a cop, and I feel like his jobs are not really the point of the movies. I could think of, or he's like a prince or something, which I don't know if we want to count a ruler as a job. I guess it is, but
right.
That's another topic where it could just be like, let's do a whole mini series on like royalty, our favorite royalty in films, so I didn't want to get into that. But
I think
another one on my list was actually you could do something like Jodha Akbar. That's an amazing one for occupation anyway. And I was thinking about the 1940s Sikandar with Prithvi Raj Kapoor, which is one of my favorites for like historical films. And what does it mean to be an emperor, and like kind of an emperor with a conscience, which is sort of handed to him by the noble people of India, are the ones who kind of encourage him to be like, whoa, you don't need to come all the way this far east, go back. It's fine, let's be friends. Whatever. So interesting revisionist history stuff.
Right. I think one of the most interesting jobs and like job centric movies I've ever seen is Saudagar, and I've spoken about it before. It's the Rajashri movie that has Amitabh Bachchan and Nutan in it, and it is just so powerful. I spoke about it in the Nutan episode. Amitabh Bachchan is perfectly cast in that role. That is a movie where his work and what he does is so central to that whole film, and even the title is perfect. He's a Saudagar, which means he's a businessman. It's all about the trade for him, and it's all about what he can get for what he gives, and just such a great character, and infuriating but beautifully played. Like nobody but Amitabh could have done that role, and he's just so phenomenal. And it's a very satisfying movie because yes, he's horrendous and awful, and you just want Nutan to like lash out at him because that's what you want to do. And she does get the big speech where she basically calls him out for the opportunist user of people that he is, and how he has no conscience, and he does get his comeuppance in the end. So definitely a movie I would recommend. This is back when the Rajashri movies had really good stories, had really good like heart before they started making these like weird like wedding videos. But back in the day, Rajesh actually made some really good films, and Sadagar is really really powerful. And his profession is the only time I've even heard of this profession, which is he is a date tree tapper.
Right.
So he's one of those people that taps it to get the
Sap, right?
nectar from
Yeah.
the sap that he can then convert into jaggery.
Mm.
And apparently it is like there's a short season in which that happens. And basically, if that's your profession, you need to make all your money during those short few seasons when you can convert it into jaggery, and then you basically have to live off of that for the rest of the year. So the pressure is on. That's a good movie. I feel like Amitabh has done a lot of films actually where his work is very central to who he is as
Mm.
like his identity is very wound up in it. Because that was
Mhm.
an interesting comment you made about how, making work everything about yourself and not necessarily having any dimension. But I feel like Amitabh does that a lot,
Mm.
where in his movies, especially from the 70s, what he does is essentially who he is.
Mm.
And it just kind of like takes over his whole life. I mean, Abhiman is like that too, where it's like his identity as a musician and a singer is primary.
Yeah.
Everything else comes after that. And if he has to destroy his marriage, so be it.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I feel
Okay.
like we need to do an episode on people who are undercover in some way, because like
Oh,
Dawn and some of those are really, really fun, and how it influences
yeah.
what you can say to people and what you can't say, and what they know
Right.
about you and what they don't, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a fun. Yeah,
Disguised.
exactly. Plus then there's always fun, fashions and masks and
Yes.
wigs and all that kind of stuff too, which is always fun.
Awesome. Well, I think that does it for this episode. If you guys have any movies that you like where the male protagonist has a job or a career or a profession, or a calling or a vocation, then let us know. Or if you have a movie where the person basically just sits around all day like a lout, that would be interesting also. Although I don't know what we would say about that. So thank you for watching this episode of Filmi Ladies, and we will see you next week with another topic. Bye.
Clock in, eat lunch, go home.
Yes. Career advice from Prem Chopra and the Filmi Ladies.